This is Software Engineering Radio, the podcast for professional developers, on the web at se-radio.net. SE Radio brings you relevant and detailed discussions of software engineering topics at least once a month. SE Radio is brought to you by IEEE Software Magazine, online at computer.org/software.
Hello, this is Charles Anderson for Software Engineering Radio. Today we're talking to John Sonmez, author of the book Soft Skills. John is a software developer, podcaster, blogger, consultant, entrepreneur, YouTube host, and author. He is also retired by some definitions of the word, although he's still very busy. John, welcome to Software Engineering Radio. Is there anything else you'd like to add to that brief background?
I think that mostly covers it. I guess I've got my hands in a lot of different things. I guess I'd say that mostly what I am today is just someone who wants to help software developers to live better lives and to be better at their jobs. And so that's everything that I do is based around those two goals.
Okay, great. So Software Engineering Radio bills itself as the podcast for professional software developers, and your book is a manual for professional software developers. Therefore, it seemed to me to be a pretty good fit for our audience. But your book is not really about code. What is it about?
So it's actually about all the non-code things that I think is, and it's funny because these aren't things that just software developers deal with, right? These are things that people deal with, but I approach it from the software developer's mindset and the software developer, as the target person to read this book. But soft skills really is, I think there's lots of definitions for it, and so a lot of people would say, okay, well, soft skills, that's people skills, right? And to me, it's more than that. It's what it is exactly how you described it, which is everything that isn't code that is in your life. It's anything that's not a hard skill, not a technical skill, but it's a soft skill. So that involves people skills, but it also involves career management. How do you climb the ladder? How do you manage your career? Are you actually even thinking about these things? A lot of developers aren't. It even involves things like productivity or finance or even fitness. These are all areas of our life that exists, that we have to have these skills in order to be successful, and not just successful financially, not successfully just in our career, but to be successful in the terms of being a happy human being who feels like they have a balanced life and enjoys what they do, can get the most out of life. So that's really where what the book is focused on is taking kind of, as you described in the intro, I've done a lot of things. I've been in a lot of different places and involved in a lot of different things, and I've kind of tried to distill all that wisdom that I've gathered from what I've done, and also I've had the privilege of talking to a lot of millionaires and some billionaires and very successful people in the software development realm and other fitness and other realms, and gain their wisdom and put that into that book. So that's kind of what the idea and the goal of that book is.
Yeah, I like you say, the term soft skills I was assuming was going to be relationship stuff, but it's a whole lot more than that, which was interesting to me. The book is grouped into 7 sections that provide a good outline of the content. You've kind of touched on a couple of those. Could you go over those for our audience?
Sure. So, first I start off with career, which is basically like we talked about, what are your goals? How do you manage your career? How do you do things like get a raise, or how do you think about what kind of company do you even want to work for? Like, have you even considered the differences between the different kinds of developers that there are in different types of companies, and how how to best present yourself at a job? So then we get into the second section, which is marketing yourself, which is something that I'm really big on. I don't think there's hardly anyone in the software development field that talks about building a brand and marketing yourself. It kind of gets a bad rap, but I kind of diffuse that and say, look, marketing is just really about providing a value or a service to someone who's looking for that. And that's what we really should be doing as software developers. So I talk about how you can go out there and build a brand, create a blog, maybe even create your own podcast or be on podcasts. Get that out there so that you become a name in the industry, which is it's gonna benefit your career and your life in multiple ways. Then we get into really productivity, which productivity is obviously a wide topic, but I sort of give my methods and my ways of being extremely productive. At least what I felt has been extremely productive. As in the last few years, I've been able to produce like 55 Pluralsight courses and dozens of blog posts and just a lot of different content. And so I have a system for that, and I go over that. And then I get into learning, which I've had to learn how to learn. I think a lot of developers, a lot of people in general don't really master the skill. They get used to going to school and having someone tell them how to learn or what to learn instead of figuring out how to learn things really on their own. So I dedicate a section talking about an exact 10-step process that I've used as I've been teaching Pluralsight courses and teaching developers to be able to take something and very quickly learn it, and then one of the key parts of that is to teach it to someone else. Then we get into the whole finance side, which I'll just briefly touch on. But I think a lot of software developers, a lot of people, we use money every day, right? Our a lot of our career choices and decisions are based on money. We're thinking about retirement. But a lot of people don't even understand how a bank works, and it's nothing to be ashamed of. But a majority of people out there really don't understand how the financial system and how money actually works and how it affects their lives. And so I think it's an important thing to have that knowledge. Same thing in the fitness side, and that's where it goes next. Is I think a lot of developers don't realize how important health and fitness is, not just for living longer, but for feeling better, for having confidence. Really affects a lot of areas of your life. So I talk about that, and then finally I wrap it up with the section that I call spirit, which is basically I was trying to come up with a good term for this, but it's basically sort of, this would be the kind of things that you might read in, and I don't like to use the term, but self-help books, but things where, the mental aspect, in order to be really successful and well-rounded, I think there's an important part of that is to have a positive attitude, to think about things the right way, to be able to master yourself, to have self-discipline and control your emotions and your mind, and to really, that's the thing that really empowers you. And so I wrap up, with that, and that, in my view, that's why I call it the software developer's life manual, is because it kind of covers all areas of life there.
Yeah, it is. It is quite expansive, and like I said before, I didn't think that the title "Soft Skills" did it justice. It seemed to be covering so much, but within each section you have chapters, and the chapters are quite small and digestible. It's almost like it was a collection of blog postings. What was the origin of the book? And if it wasn't blog postings, why did you go for that structure?
So there's a few different reasons that I went for that structure. One of them was, I've been blogging for a while. I'm used to writing those shorter articles. I did actually derive a lot of the chapters. They're not copies of blog posts, but from ideas of popular blog posts that I wrote. I kind of rehashed my thoughts on that. So that's where kind of some of that came from. That's how I knew what people were interested in and what topics to discuss, and also from YouTube videos and things like that. But really the primary motivation for breaking it up like that is that I thought about two things, which is one, how I like to consume content. Like when I'm reading a book, what would be ideal? And for me, I do this all the time now. I'll be reading a book, and I don't know if you do this as well, but if you're reading a physical book, like I'll scan ahead to try to find out where the chapter ends, because I want to end on the chapter, because I know you could just put a bookmark in, but then I forget where I'm at, right? I lose the context. So I want to finish on chapters. And so what ends up happening is I reach for my book or reach for my Kindle, and I put it back down because I'm like, well, I only have 5 minutes, so I'll wait till I have half an hour to read it. And so I wanted to create the book that you could just grab, when you have 5 minutes, and you could read a whole chapter in 5 minutes and get a complete thought and so you could work your way through it. I felt like that's an easier way to read, and then the reader doesn't feel like they're trying to get to the end, because they know that, in fact, when they get to the end, they're like, oh, I wish there were more in this chapter. So that's the feeling I wanted to create. And then also from a writing perspective, I wrote this book in probably about 3 months. I broke it down into those pieces that, I could write a chapter a day. And writing a chapter a day is making solid progress towards getting that book. And I actually talk about it in the productivity section. In fact, it's a little meta when I talk about how I'm writing the book, and basically about setting a quota and a goal for myself is, okay, every single day I am going to write a chapter of this book. And so I know that there's 74 chapters in this book. So in 74 days, I will have written at least the first draft of this book.
Okay, yeah, that makes perfect sense. I certainly appreciate smaller, more digestible chapters for exactly the reasons you mentioned. I remember Scott Meyer's Effective C++ book was really good for that.
Yeah, that was actually one of my favorite books of all time, by the way.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, it's been a long time since I've read it. So we don't have time to go into all of the sections of the book today, but I wanted to just focus on a couple of them. The first two that you mentioned, career and marketing yourself. So in career, is there one area of career management that you think many software developers could use help with?
Let's see. So I would say for career management, the biggest thing I would say is just having a goal, like knowing where you're going. And I kind of start the book off really with that, because I think that is so important. I always draw this analogy to a ship that's sailing in the ocean without a destination. Like, you're going to float, you're going to go somewhere, but who knows where you're going to go, right? But when you have a goal in mind, when you have a destination, then you can prop the sail in a particular direction and set the rudder in order to be able to go that direction. Then you're more likely that you can use the wind to take you there. And so many developers, I think, today they just assume that in 5 years they'll be in a better place, but they don't have it charted out. They don't know where they're going to go. They don't really have solid goals. So it's in almost all areas of life, I found that's to be true, that if you actually set a goal, especially if you write it on paper, or especially if you take the extra step and you put it on paper and put it somewhere where you'll see it every single day, then you're so much more, the chances of you achieving that goal go up tremendously. And then you get into this habit of becoming someone who reaches what I call a finisher, finishing things. And then pretty soon you're jumping to next goal. And literally in my life, once I started doing this, setting goals and actually achieving them, in a 2-year period, I achieved more than I had in the previous 10 years just by doing this.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Stephen Covey calls it, start with the end in mind.
Yeah.
Certainly, that's valuable advice. You cover pretty much all of the work models for software developers, from regular employees to entrepreneurs starting their own company. On the show here in episode 168, as I recall, we discussed contracting or consulting, actually. Where do you see the profession of software development headed? Is there a work model that you think will change, become more dominant or anything?
So this is an interesting question. I've got an unpopular answer. I know that it's unpopular because I did a blog post on this and people didn't like it. But I'm here to tell the truth. and where I honestly think that we're going, like just in general, the workforce in general, is to an entrepreneurial type of system. I think when you look at it from political systems with minimum wages and healthcare and requirements and things like that, burdens that are traditionally put on employers, but employers are kind of shirking off and saying, well, we don't want to do this. And when you have the internet and you have, things like Upwork and Fiverr and all these, ways to get contract services, and we're getting more of a global economy where even software development is becoming commoditized to some degree, and you can hire really good developers, outside of in third world countries. I think we're going to get to this point where basically the workforce is a majority of entrepreneurs who are building their own businesses, who are working as freelancers, as providing services, not just hourly. There's a difference, I think, between staff augmentation, which is where you hire someone hourly and you tell them what to do, right? And that's, I mean, it's. I'm not trying to disrespect that. I did that for a long time. But there's a difference between that and being the kind of hourly person who basically provides a service, who is billing for their time, but they're providing a specific service, or even a package, a productized service where maybe I charge you $2,000 and I build you a website, right? So I think that's where we're going to end up going. And I talk about this also from the perspective of me having a business and me hiring people. I have one direct employee that's a full-time employee, and then I have about 9 contractors working for me on a weekly basis that do things from, recording video and editing video, to editing podcasts, to managing my content and doing editing on my blog posts, to doing transcription, right? So I'm already doing this model because it's more efficient and effective for me, rather than having 2 or 3 full-time employees that have to be trained in multiple disciplines, and if one of them is sick, then what do I do? So that's really where I see the profession going, and that's also why I'm such a big proponent of marketing yourself and building a brand, because in that world, or at least where I see the software development world going, you have to have a reputation. You have to have a brand, because you have to set yourself apart if you actually want to, get the business. And so I think that's what we can probably see. It's going to take a while. I think there'll still be traditional jobs. Everyone can put down the pitchforks. But long-term guaranteed employment is something that it belonged to our father's age and our grandfathers, but it's no longer a guarantee in the world that we live in, and I don't see that trend reversing.
Okay. You've set us up for the marketing, which we'll get to in a bit. Let's stick with career for a little bit. So you recommend that software developers have a specialization to avoid being a jack of all trades and a master of none. On the other hand, I'm personally suspicious of very narrow-minded over-specialization. Can you elaborate on where you think the sweet spot is?
Sure. So there's a few different ways I've seen this described. I mean, probably the most popular one that I would probably agree with is the T-shaped model, which is basically where you have a broad base and then you have a very narrow specialization. So that's where you get the T, where you deeply know something. I don't talk about the T-shaped model all that much, because I think that in order to get a deep knowledge of something, you have to build a broad base. It's too hard to get far enough deep down a chain without encountering a whole bunch of other things as well. And I think that there's more resistance. I'm always an extremist, so I'm always trying to push really hard in the direction that people don't want to go, maybe a little bit harder than you need to go, just because of the resistance to make sure that people go that direction. So when I say specialization, the reason why I push so hard about this is because if you're a specialist, you have the opportunity of being a big fish in a small pond, and a big fish in a small pond is a much better situation than being a big fish in a big pond, or worse yet, a small fish in a big pond. I can give an example of this. This is an example I use all the time. Is let's say that your garbage disposal breaks, right? And you look for someone to fix it. So you go in through and you're looking at plumbers, and you see, ABC Plumbing, you see, Jack's Plumbing, and then you see Mr. Garbage Disposal Fix-It Man Plumbing. Who do you call, right? You're more likely to call Mr. Garbage Disposal Fix-It Man, because he's niched himself down to that point. He's got a really good specialization. You assume that he's going to know the most about fixing garbage disposals, right? And so that's kind of how I see it in the software development world. Is plus remember also, like, who do you think gets paid more? the garbage disposal, Mr. Garbage Disposal Fix-It Man, probably charges a premium because of his name. People are going to pay more for a specialist, and so and it's a much rarer thing, right? In the software development community, if you just wanted to be, you think of a famous software developer like Bob Martin, and in fact, people use this as a counter argument. And okay, well, Bob Martin is a specialist of what? He's not a specialist. He's a generalist. He is just a well-known software developer. You might say agile, you might say TDD or something like that. But he's just a really well-known software developer. Now, if you want to compete with him, if you want to build a name for yourself as a well-known software, just a general software developer, that's going to be really, really hard. But I'll tell you what, if you pick a really narrowly defined specialty, something like you want to be the Android list view guy or gal, right? And the most about Android list views. Or another one, example, C++ pointer guru. You know more about pointers in C++, and you're going to explain them, the intricacies, the in and outs, better than anyone else, and that's what you focus on. You can build up a reputation. Like, people will know who you are because of that very narrow specialty. In fact, if you go to speak at conferences and you submit a paper on that, and you're known to be the Android list view guy, so of course they want to have you at this Google Android conference talking about list view because you're the list view guy, or whatever it is. I think you're going to have more of those opportunities. And then where you go from this is that it's concentric circles, right? So you start off really, really specialized. You build a name for yourself in that specialization, and then you find the bigger circle. This is where you expand out, and maybe if you get a nice, let's say you get a really solid reputation as the expert on the Android list view control. Well, then you expand out and you use that reputation to now become well known in Android development. And then maybe as you saturate that market, as you're moving to a slightly bigger pond, as you're a bigger fish, then you could maybe move out to mobile. Maybe you're the mobile development person, a well-known celebrity in that area, and then you could expand out to bigger ponds. So it's not like I'm saying, I think a lot of people misinterpret this and they think, oh, John is just saying to specialize in some super niche area, and I'm just going to focus on that, and I won't know how to do anything else. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that have a broad base. You can know a lot about a lot of things, but have your branding and your marketing and have a deep knowledge in one specific area to start with in order to build that reputation, and then you can branch out from there. But you're going to have a whole lot of an easier time doing that and getting paid a lot more if you do specialize deeply.
Okay, yeah, I confess I'm somebody who missed the subtlety there. I was assuming that you were talking about start specialized and stay specialized, but the make a special beachhead and then expand out certainly makes sense. You discuss how to, quote, hack the interview, quote. And I've heard several different variants on what that means, and to some people it's actually even kind of very suspicious. It's like, if the process could be hacked, would I even want to work for a company like that? What do you mean by that?
So when I say hack the interview, obviously my chapter title for in soft skills is designed to make someone go, oh, it might not accurately, it might not be designed so much to accurately reflect what I'm actually talking about, which is I'm not talking about cheating the interview, right? It's not like we're cheating the interview. But when I say the word hack here, I'm talking about the way that you would use hack in terms of like life hack, right? If you're familiar with the site life hack, where you're doing something that's like a shortcut or something that's going to aid you, or think about working smarter. That's what I'm thinking about here. And so when I'm talking about hacking the interview, what I'm actually talking about is actually avoiding the interview as much as possible, which is basically, a lot of developers think that the interview starts when you show up and you shake the interviewer's hand, but it starts way before then. If you want to hack the interview process, what you do is you build a relationship with the company or the interviewer ahead of time. You get a personal referral to get in the door, because the reality of the situation is that we're humans, right? We like to pride ourselves on the fact that we're rational beings, but we're not rational. We're emotional. And that's a core of who we are as human beings. As much as as much as we wish it weren't so, we don't act rationally. Plenty of scientific studies to show that in psychology. But in fact, a good book on this would be "Fooled by Randomness." That's a really good book that talks about this. But anyway, we really hire people that we like. And what we do is we make up all kinds of justifications of why they're technically competent, why they're the best candidate, when we pick the person that we like. I know I'm susceptible to this bias. Most of us are, and we've probably benefited or been hurt by this in the process. Now, this doesn't mean that you can be a fraud. I'm not saying not have any technical skills. Obviously, if you don't have any technical skills and you go into an interview, it doesn't matter if the interviewer likes you, you're not going to get the job. But if you do have skills, the best way, an interview is not the best way to determine who's the most qualified person, right? In 1 hour, you're not going to figure out who is the most qualified person. In 1 hour, you might figure out who you like. So stack the deck in your favor. Go out and make sure that don't just cold apply to a job, right? Hacking the interview is about figuring out how can you, in a smart way, get a personal referral. This might, if you don't know someone at that company, maybe you meet someone at that company. Maybe you start going to user groups that they go to. Maybe you start just connect on LinkedIn and ask to buy a cup of coffee, and maybe you figure out a way to build some relationships, or you follow someone's blog. One company that I got a job at, I really wanted to work at, I started following all the developers' blogs and commenting on their blogs. And guess what? It took a long time, but after about 3 months, every single one of those developers knew who I was. And they liked me because I liked their stuff, right? And I was genuine. I wasn't just doing this to get the job. I was actually liked their blogs, and I gave them sincere compliments. But the idea is that you set this up so that you're not coming in cold. You're coming in with an invitation, someone giving you a personal referral, and even if you can, when I saw this technique and I was amazed by this technique. A buddy of mine that that's running a startup, and I'm an advisor on that startup. We were trying to get into to accelerator programs. He wanted to get into accelerator programs, and we had some interviews for the accelerator program, and he actually emailed the people that we were supposed to interview for the accelerator program ahead of time and said, hey, could we meet just a 5-minute, I just want to touch base with you before the interview, like pre-interview, over Skype, just want to introduce myself and just chat with you before the interview. And I was like, oh, how could this work? What are you doing? They're going to say no. And all three of them said yes. And they spent about 45 minutes, an hour talking to us before the interview. And then we walked into these interviews, and we hardly had to say a word, because this person that that we had talked to ahead of time was now pitching us to the other interviewers. So there's amazing ways that you can build a relationship ahead of time before that. A lot of people walk into the interview just cold and clammy and trying to make an impression in 1 hour, and that's just it's the luck of the draw at that point. So you can really stack the odds in your favor, and that's what I consider hacking the interview process. It's not about figuring out how to cheat the system. It's about how to make it so that you're able to put your best foot forward really early on in the process.
Okay, yeah. In my own experience, there have been a lot of times. Well, what happens sometimes is somebody will ask me for a resume, and I don't actually have one up to date because I haven't needed one to get jobs, because I have, I already know people and have that entry that you're looking for.
Yep.
You don't specifically mention, quote, networking, unquote, but that's a lot about what you're talking about, right?
Yeah, and it's interesting, the reason why I don't mention the word networking is I think it gets a bad rap. Like, everyone mentions networking, and
right, and it's got a bad reputation.
Exactly, because people do it wrong. Because this is when people network, or this is when I have people ask me about networking, is when they're looking for a job, and that's not when you network.
Right,
you network 6 months before you're looking for a job, because when you network when you need something, that's not called networking. That's called mooching. That's called using people.
Desperation.
Exactly. And people know it, right? And so, you build relationships ahead of time, and that's, you want to call that networking, that's what real networking is. It's building, it's not just showing up user groups when you got laid off. It's going to user groups for years and meeting people and having connections and giving them value first, right? When you come to someone and you're like, "Hey, what can you do for me? Can you give me a job? Can you give me a referral?" You're just at, well, what have you given? Give first and then ask. I think that's where so many people get networking wrong, and that's why it gets such a bad rap. It's not trading business cards. It's providing other people value first, and that's how you grow.
Yeah, exactly. So kind of shifting gears a bit here to the section on marketing. Among engineers, marketing is often viewed as a dark art that's practiced by people who wear nice suits and shiny shoes and don't really understand technology. How is marketing relevant to software developers?
So, the thing I think it comes to is, first, like marketing in general, right? Marketing exists for a reason. Marketing is just simply, it's gotten a bad rap, but all it really is connecting someone who needs a product or service with that product or service, right? And as a software developer, you provide a product or service, right? You provide code, or you can write code. So there's, without marketing, no one would know. There'd be people that need something, and there'd be people that have something, and they wouldn't meet each other. They wouldn't know about it. So you have to have marketing. And really, as a software developer, the thing is, everyone sells themselves, right? Like, whether you believe it or not, whether you want to or not, every time you go into a meeting with your boss or coworkers and try to convince them of your idea, that's selling yourself. That is marketing. That is salesmanship, right? So you can either have this skill that you really need, or not have the skill. Either way, you're going to be judged on this skill, right? So, a lot of developers say, "Oh, I don't want to market myself. I don't want to do that. People should respect me for my ability and my code." And the problem is, they would love to do that, but they don't know about it. They don't know that you're the greatest coder in the world, that you're God's gift to coding, because because there's no evidence of it, because you haven't done any kind of marketing. You could have the greatest product in the world. I think imagine creating a startup company today, trying to build a company and not doing any marketing. Like, you just expect people to come because you built this awesome thing. Well, I'm an entrepreneur, and I know that that's not true. It doesn't happen. And the same thing is true with us as software developers. And even if you're, obviously this is true if you're an entrepreneur, you're a freelancer, but just as a career developer, it's very true as well. Because if you can market yourself well, if you can, if employers know who you are, right? Let's imagine, I'll give you an example here that I learned. This is why I got so much into marketing, because when I first created my blog, I didn't create my blog to market myself. I had no idea. I was just expressing my thoughts and just trying to help and teach people. And, I started getting emails, and eventually I got this call from a company, and they said, "Hey, John, we read your blog. We'd like to offer you a position." And I said, "Well, oh, you mean an interview?" They said, No. We just want to offer you a job. We've been reading your blog for a while. We all know that we want to hire you. So, and I was shocked, right?
Interview hacked.
Exactly, right. So I started to realize the value of this. Like, wow, this is quite powerful. And you can imagine what my negotiating position would be, right? If you go and you apply for a job, right, and then the employer is evaluating you against other people, and then they give you an offer, your negotiating position is not the best, right? You need something, they're giving something. If they come to you and say, "Hey, John, I want to hire you specifically," can you imagine how much of a stronger negotiation position that you're going to be in that case? And so that's really the power of marketing yourself. It just opens up so many opportunities. As I've taught other developers how to do this and learned how to do this myself and do it in a tasteful way, I'd like to mention also here that what I define marketing is basically giving people value. That's how I produce a ton of free content. My philosophy is I give away 90% of what I do for free, and I charge for 10% of it. I make podcasts, I make blog posts, I do YouTube videos, all this content I put out there for free, and I charge for for a small portion of what I do. But if you provide enough people value, they're going to spread your name. They're going to spread the stuff that you created, and they're going to see you as valuable. And that's the best way to market it. And that's a tasteful way. I think most software developers that are afraid of marketing, don't like the word marketing. I think you can stomach the idea of giving people value, of helping people, and that is not only is it the most effective way to market, but it's also the most tasteful way. You're not going to feel like you're join the dark side if you're giving people value.
Okay, so what are some of the activities you mentioned? A couple, like blogging.
Yeah, so that's where I start. Most software developers. I've actually got a blogging course that I send via email. It's totally free. If you just go to simpleprogrammer.com, you can go there and you can sign up. You'll see a pop-up and you can sign up for the course. But it's one that I recommend highly because it's so accessible. There's sort of a culture around blogging in the software development field, and it's extremely effective. It's just you just have to be consistent. Right. If I go to a conference, I'll talk about how to market yourself. I'll do a talk on that. And frequently I'll be in a room with several hundred people and I'll say, okay, hold up your hand if you have a blog. And probably about 50% of the developers in the room will hold up their hand. I'll say, no, keep your hand up if you have blogged in the last month. And, most hands will go down. Maybe there's like a quarter left or less. And I'll say, okay, now keep your hand up if you've blogged in the last week. And, almost all the hands have gone down at this point, but maybe there's a few up. And I'll say, keep your hand up if you've blogged for the last 52 weeks, the last year, consistently, once a week, at least, right? And there'll be maybe one hand remaining and usually zero. And so if there's one hand remaining, I say, congratulations, you're like the 0.99 0.95% of the developer community as far as marketing yourself with a blog because no one else is doing this. So if you can be extremely effective just by creating a blog and just by updating it once a week. So few developers do that you're going to set yourself apart. In fact, considering that I'm doing this at a conference where those developers are usually in the top 10% already. I mean, imagine how much distinction, how much more you're separating yourself away from the herd if you're doing that. If you're just doing that one simple thing. So along with that, blogging is obviously a good first step in being consistent. But you can also, obviously like we're doing right now, this podcast. People are listening to me and you. And that's a marketing thing, right? They're getting value out of this, hopefully, and then it's also spreading both of our names. So this is a good thing, marketing for us, right? You can create your own podcast, not hard to do, right? You can either be on someone else's or create your own. You can also write magazine articles. Maybe you're not going to get published in MSDN magazine or IEEE on your first try, but as you build up a reputation, you can start with smaller periodicals. You can write a book. Maybe you're not going to get a publisher to create a book or to sign you on a deal, but you can. It's so easy to self-publish today. It is extremely easy. Never been an easier time in history. And then any kind of medium that you consume, you can be on. So YouTube is a great one for, I do a lot of in front of the camera talking to people, obviously, but screencasting on YouTube, like doing tutorials and showing people how to write code or to solve a problem. Excellent way to get exposure and to market yourself. Stack Overflow, open source projects, contributing to them, creating them. Quora is another good one today. I see a lot of developers answering questions on Quora. So there's just a ton of different ways out there to market yourself and to build up a reputation and brand.
Right. Yeah. You were talking about tastefully doing this. And something that kind of occurs to me is that, most developers object to marketing because of a bad taste in their mouth or something like that. But you think about the luminaries or rock stars that we know. You mentioned Uncle Bob. Why Bob Martin? Why do we know him? Well, because he's done podcasts and he's done books and he's done blog posts and he's spoken at conferences, all those kind of things that you're talking about. And even if he wasn't specifically doing them to market himself, that's how we all know who he is.
Right. Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, it can be done in a tasteful way. I think, a lot of the marketing that we think of today is not good marketing because it doesn't provide us value. But I don't know about you, but I like to get uh, I like to find out about things that I'm interested in. So I even like to get emails from Apple telling me about a Mac upgrade or whatever, the new stuff, because I'm excited about that stuff. And so I think a lot of people don't realize that when you're providing value to people, they're excited. They want to read your new blog post. They want to hear about this. Go ahead and tweet it on Twitter and share it on Facebook, because people want to read the stuff if it's providing them value.
Sure. Just to play devil's advocate here, if I look at you and what you're doing right now, I see you doing all kinds of marketing, but I don't see how you would have any time left over for programming. So how would you answer the developer who says, well, I don't want to do those things because they take away from programming?
Yeah, so that's a great point. So I wish I had some more time for programming. I've sort of had to, my business and my business model is around teaching developers soft skills and marketing themselves. And so that's where my focus is, but it wasn't always there, right? I built my reputation, just like I talked about specialization, right, from a smaller pond and then went to a bigger pond. And now, as much as I love coding and I love programming, it doesn't make sense for me to spend my time doing that, because I have a greater effect and can reach more people by doing what I'm doing. And a lot of that is teaching developers how to market themselves, but it doesn't require that much effort to have that much of effect, right? So I'm building an entire business based around this. So I spend my time doing this. In fact, to be honest with you, once you have this going, right? I currently I'm currently in Europe, and I've been here for like 2.5 months. I'm on a 3-month trip, and I'm working 1 day a week. Every Friday is my work day, so I'm actually doing all this in 1 day. So it's actually not requiring even that much, even when it's my whole business. So most developers, I think, if you just write one blog post a week, how much is that effort is that going to take you? It's not going to take you a huge amount of effort, and you can have it automatically go out on Twitter and Facebook when you publish it. If you step it up and write a couple of blog posts a week, even then you're going to have a huge return on your investment there in about a year worth of time. So it doesn't take a huge amount to do that. Now, if you want to become a super famous software developer, it's going to take work. It's going to take a lot of work and hard work. And yeah, I'm not going to lie about that. But not everyone needs that. Just having, just a lot of the students that have worked with me, that have bought my course on how to market yourself, they've basically, started out, maybe they're doing freelancing and they're billing $75 an hour. And with just creating a blog and doing a few of the things that I'm helping them do, they've been able to raise their hourly rate to $150, $200 an hour. That's a huge difference, for a small amount of effort. So there's still a lot that you can do with a little bit. It doesn't have to be a full-time thing. I would say that if you spent 10% of your work time working on marketing type of activities, branding, building your brand, and building your reputation, that would be enough to have a very big impact on your career.
Okay, so perhaps maybe it's appropriate to think about it in terms of investing in yourself.
Exactly, and it truly is, and it's good that you use that word, because this isn't going to happen in a week. It's not going to happen in 3 months. You're talking about a minimum investment of about a year of being of consistently doing this and working towards this. You'll start to see some traction, but you got to be consistent. You got to be able to see this as an investment, not something that you just do and immediately get results.
So yeah, following up on that, what if someone is in a situation where they would like to get a new position in the next 30 or 60 days? We talked before about, not going out and quote networking, unquote, to like say, give me a job. And, you were just now talking about the length of time to make this investment. Are there any quick win kind of tips that you might have?
Yeah, I think some of them look a lot like the long-term investments as well because they'll still pay off. They just won't pay off as well. So the very first thing that I would do is hire a professional resume writer to write my resume. A lot of people frown on this too, and they're like, that I feel like I should write my own resume. But my answer to that is always the CEO of your company. Does he write his own code or she write her own code? No, they hired you to write code because because they're not an expert at writing code unless they are, right? Sure, they might be able to hack out some JavaScript and figure it out, but you're the expert. So why do you, as a software developer, think that you should write a resume? Are you a professional resume writer? Have you even written more than 5 in your whole life? There's people who have written hundreds or thousands of them. Hire a professional to do that thing, and you're going to get a much better result. So that's a really good. And I've done this myself. I've had my wife do this. I've helped tons of software developers, dozens of software developers to get a resume writer to write their resume and seen tremendous results on that. It makes a huge difference. A resume is an ad for yourself. It's a 1 page or 2 page ad. A lot of companies, it's the only thing they'll ever see of you. You think about it, when you see an ad in a magazine or a brochure, it should pop, it should be effective, it should convey the information. There's a lot there that you want to get right in a very short amount of time. So that can make a huge impact on getting another job or getting a promotion, is having a very good, well-written resume. And it doesn't mean that you don't have to do any work. You provide the resume writer with all the details and the information, and then they're going to format it and package it in a way that's going to present nicer, that's going to highlight your strong points, that's going to pop, that's going to be a good advertisement for you. So that's number one, I would say. And then number two, I would go default right back to blogging. Even, if I were looking for a job in the next 30 to 60 days, I would blog 3 times a week. I would try to get a blog up, start blogging 3 times a week, just short, maybe 500 to 1,000 word posts, small things, just so that you get a nice, good volume in there, so that when you go into an interview, because before you go into an interview, right, let's say I'm interviewing someone, what's the first thing that I'm going to do? Well, let's see, Joe, let me type your name into Google, right? That's what pretty much every interviewer, I guarantee you, is going to do. They're going to type your name into Google and see what comes up. And if your blog comes up, or if you have it on your resume, they're going to click that and they're going to look through it and they're going to see when was the last time you updated your blog, and they're going to see what you wrote. And if it's interesting and there's a lot of content there, they're going to be pretty impressed probably. So that can be effective. It's not going to do what I call inbound marketing, right? If you blog for 60 days, chances of people finding you is low, right? So people aren't going to come after you. That's going to take a year or more. But it's good for outbound marketing. If you have a blog and you've got a lot of articles on there that you've written in the last 60 days and you send that out, or you're already going in for an interview, that's going to be really helpful. So I'd say that those are the 2 main activities. Obviously, in a 60-day time window, you can also start showing up at user groups and not pushing, right? Just showing up. Just showing up is enough. So I would probably do that. And I would also probably invest in a nice suit. In most places, that's going to help your chances. I think that's probably, you could probably make some connections at a company in that time as well, especially if you know someone who knows someone. And again, at that short time window, you want to make sure that you don't do high pressure type of networking. You want to just meet people and just, if there's some way you can provide them value, no strings attached, that's always good as well.
Okay, yeah, I like that distinction between inbound and outbound marketing for your blog. And so if you're trying to do something quick, it's going to be outbound sort of thing. But typically you're talking about blogging as an inbound thing so that people can discover you rather than you going out and looking for them. Exactly.
Yep.
Oh, great. So we've covered the sections on career and marketing yourself. What do you think the next most important section in your book is for developers?
I would probably say productivity. It's hard between that and learning and mindset, the spirit side. But productivity, like having a good productivity system and understanding how to be productive can overcome a lot of obstacles. I think, when you look at a lot of people's day, they, honestly look at it, you might be effective, like your total effectiveness might be like 1 or 2 hours on average of actually producing stuff. And that can be tripled fairly easily with a good system and scheduling and time tracking. And if you can get to the point where you're producing 3 times the output that you were before, or sometimes 4 times the output, you're going to be able to be a lot more effective, even if you're doing things the wrong way. That level of output. So that's where I would say is probably the next important section. And I give my entire process. I've got a system that I've developed that I plan my week out. I use sort of a combination of the Pomodoro technique, which is this technique where you set a 20-minute timer and you work on one task, focus, and then you take a 5-minute break. But I plan that out on a Kanban board, and I go over that entire system. I also use what I call a quota system as well. And I give some of my productivity kind of techniques and hacks that can help you to be productive. And these were the things that I use that, I think I talk about it in the book, but in 1 year, I had used these techniques to produce 30 full-length, 5-hour-long Pluralsight courses, produce 52 blog posts, I think something like 30 YouTube videos, and produce 2 podcasts, all like within 1 year time period, plus doing hourly consulting and hitting the gym and running, 3 times a week. So I was able to be extremely productive using those productivity techniques, and I don't hold anything back. It's all in the book. So.
Yeah, I think I saw a blog post of yours on that before I even got to that chapter on the book, and I liked it because it showed how to kind of put the pieces together of Pomodoro technique plus Kanban, or whatever you want to call it. I found that interesting. So as we're kind of wrapping things up here, how can people find out more about you and follow your activities? I'll include links to everything so you don't have to spell things out.
Oh, sure. So definitely, my hub is at simpleprogrammer.com. And, from there, you can find everything I've got. Obviously, if you're interested in marketing yourself, I sell a course with books on, how to market yourself as a software developer at devcareerboost.com. And then I've got a YouTube channel, which has totally free YouTube videos. I do 3 videos a week. My blog has, content coming out pretty much every day now. And then I've got a podcast called Get Up and Code, which is about fitness for programmers. And then one called Entreprogrammers, which is for entrepreneur developers. And then another one, which is the Simple Programmer podcast, which is basically Q&A type of questions that I've answered that are sort of the same type of things from the YouTube video, and then interviews. But yeah, so that's it. It's all, you can find it all at simpleprogrammer.com.
So that's kind of a portal to John's world.
Yep, pretty much.
Okay. Well, John, thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you. It was great to be here. Great questions.
Thanks. This is Charles Anderson for Software Engineering Radio. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to SE Radio, an educational program brought to you by IEEE Software Magazine. For more information about the podcast, including other episodes, visit our website at se-radio.net. To provide feedback, you can write comments on each episode on the website or write a review on iTunes. Mention or message us on Twitter at SE Radio, or search for the Software Engineering Radio Group on LinkedIn, Google+, or Facebook. You can also email us at team@se-radio.net. This and all other episodes of SE Radio is licensed under the Creative Commons 2.5 license. Thanks again for your support.